After being married for 27 years, I never imagined I'd write here, but life's full of surprises. Recently, I discovered my wife's affair thanks to her partner's confession. It hurt, but I found a way to heal by taking back what was rightfully mine. I'm a 56-year-old man married to my 52-year-old wife for 27 years. Over these years, it's hard to put into words what she means to me, but when someone you deeply care about betrays you, it cuts deep. We have two grown daughters, Sophie and Cassandra, both living and working in other states. Our marriage has been smooth sailing and we've built a good life together, but recently, everything changed. It all started when I got a Facebook message from a stranger named Pedro. At first, I brushed it off as a scam, but his persistence got to me. When he mentioned my wife, it sent a shiver down my spine. I wanted to confront her, but something held me back after all these years together. Normally, I would have told my wife right away, but this time something felt off. Instead of jumping to conclusions, I decided to dig deeper before involving her in this ordeal. Who are you? That's the message I sent back to Pedro. I wanted to play along and see what he wanted. He claimed to be an old friend of my wife's, but he looked much younger. When he mentioned wanting to talk about something heavy, my mind went to the possibility of him being her affair partner. Despite our long marriage, I couldn't rule out the idea of cheating. As we continued chatting, he avoided revealing much, insisting on meeting in person. I wasn't about to risk it, so I suggested a public place with cameras and brought along protection. I also informed a close friend of my whereabouts, just in case. I couldn't bring myself to just block Pedro and forget about it, especially since he seemed to know my wife quite well. When I reached the square, I sat on a bench waiting for him. It didn't take long before he arrived, looking much like his Facebook photo. His formal attire struck me. It was something you might wear to church. He approached me with a sad smile, apologizing for dragging me out. He seemed hesitant, waiting for my permission to speak. He then surprised me by talking about finding Christ and how it changed his life. I wondered if it was a religious ploy, but he quickly assured me he wasn't there to preach. Feeling reassured, I listened as Pedro continued. He spoke about his journey towards redemption and the importance of seeking forgiveness from those he'd wronged. Despite my apprehension, I allowed him to proceed, driven by curiosity. Then he dropped a bombshell. He confessed to having an affair with my wife during her previous job when she was his boss. My mind went blank upon hearing this revelation. He knew my wife well enough to provide intimate details, leaving me torn between disbelief and suspicion. Pedro looked at me with genuine concern, but I couldn't shake the feeling that this might all be an elaborate scheme. Nonetheless, I snapped back to reality, trying to make sense of it all. I questioned Pedro, asking if he had any proof to back up his claim. To my relief, he admitted he didn't have any evidence. I needed a reason not to believe him, and the lack of proof gave me just that. Despite his request for forgiveness, I couldn't grant it yet, as I still harbored doubts about his sincerity. After our conversation, I thanked him for his honesty and returned home. However, even after seeing my wife later that night and noticing her normal demeanor, I couldn't shake off my suspicions. Although we usually shared everything, I hesitated to tell her about Pedro's revelations, fearing the possibility of her involvement. This internal conflict pushed me to conduct my own investigation. After Pedro failed to provide any proof, I turned to my wife's electronic devices, hoping to find evidence there. While she slept that night, a rare occurrence as I usually fell asleep first, I delved into her social media accounts and emails, digging deeper than I cared to admit. Despite my exhaustive search, I found nothing incriminating. At that moment, I felt a sense of closure, convinced that Pedro was a liar with unknown motives. However, his mention of their workplace affair nagged at me, leading me to check her Slack messages. There, I discovered flirtatious exchanges with two coworkers, revealing a level of intimacy that shattered my trust. Though I'm reluctant to share the explicit details, finding such evidence made me question the foundation of our 27-year marriage and my understanding of my wife. These past 2 weeks have been eye-opening. I've learned a lot about my wife, things I never imagined. I feel foolish for not seeing the signs of infidelity earlier. I meticulously documented the evidence from her Slack messages, confirming Pedro's claims. It's devastating to realize she had intimate relationships with multiple coworkers. While I haven't confronted her yet, the thought of her continuing to meet these men haunts me. I'm ready to take action, but I need advice. Despite our long marriage, I'm prepared to be firm and ensure there are consequences. Divorce seems inevitable, but I'm uncertain about the next steps. My children are adults, so custody isn't a concern, but I fear their reaction. They've always been close to me, and the thought of them hating me weighs heavily. Divorce isn't something I want to put them through, but ultimately, their well-being must come first. I came across some interesting suggestions for seeking revenge, but I've decided to take a different approach. Despite the pain caused by Pedro's revelation, I'm inclined to let him off the hook. His repentance and confession played a crucial role in uncovering the truth. I'll provide an update soon to share how things unfold. Update: It's been over a month since my last post, and my personal life has been chaotic. However, progress has been made regarding the situation with my wife. I knew the process wouldn't be easy, so I took a bold step. I arranged a video call with my wife, her father, and some close relatives who supported me. Keeping the purpose of the call a surprise, I waited until everyone was present to unmute myself and confront her. I mentioned the names Pedro Gonzalez, Tim Scallon, and John Walker Babb, which clearly shocked her. Despite her attempt to speak, she seemed at a loss for words. She seemed torn between confessing and continuing to lie, but it was clear that I was too well informed for her to deceive me. Is this really how you want to handle things? Are you serious? I confronted her, feeling a mix of anger and disappointment. She attempted to shut down the conversation by closing her laptop lid, but I couldn't let it go. I recounted in vivid detail everything I had discovered about her affairs, not holding back any information. Her family, who had joined the call, reacted with a range of emotions. Her dad was heartbroken, her brother was angry, and her cousin seemed unsure how to respond. Despite her father's attempts to dissuade me, her brother acknowledged that my actions were justified. Prior to the call, I had consulted with the best divorce lawyer in town and already initiated the divorce process. When she returned home, I served her with the papers, informing her that she would need to find somewhere else to stay. Despite her attempts to reconcile, it was too late in my mind. I couldn't bring myself to entertain her attempts to talk because deep down, I knew there was nothing she could say to mend the situation. Since then, she's only been back to the house once while I was out to collect more of her belongings. Our interactions have been minimal, and she hasn't addressed the divorce papers. I've made an effort to shield our daughters from the messy details, but I fear they'll eventually find out. I hope they won't resent me for it. Meanwhile, I'm exploring ways to confront her affairs, although I'm limited by my lack of knowledge about her partners. That said, I'll keep you updated, and hopefully there will be a positive resolution. Update: Unfortunately, my daughters already know about the situation. Their uncle inadvertently revealed too much, leaving them aware of the discord between their mother and me. I never intended to turn them against her, but it seems I couldn't prevent it. I never planned to tell them, but now that they know, I'm relieved. They're adults, and I'd rather not deal with any backlash from keeping them in the dark. Update 2: It's been a while since I last shared, so I'm not sure if you all remember my story, but here's what you've been waiting for: the final update. My daughters became quite involved in the process. While I didn't want them to resent their mother, especially Cassandra, who seemed to be leaning that way, they assured me they didn't hate her. The divorce proceedings went smoother than expected, with our assets evenly divided. Her lawyer initially fought hard for the house, which I was reluctant to give up, knowing how much she cherished it. However, my lawyer, who was quite skilled, applied pressure from a different angle, leading her to agree to let go of the house without any alimony payments, which simplified matters. It seemed odd how easily she relented, but later I learned that she and Cassandra had a major fallout, leaving her feeling remorseful for her actions. She had alienated herself from her immediate family and many relatives, and I believe she simply grew wary of the ongoing conflict. Given her financial stability, the division of assets wasn't a make-or-break issue for her. Eventually, the divorce was finalized, and I found myself newly single after nearly 30 years of marriage. However, my plan wasn't complete just yet. To recap, my wife, an executive at a prominent finance company, had engaged in extramarital affairs with at least 3 subordinates, all in violation of company policy against hierarchical workplace relationships due to potential power imbalances. Pedro, the repentant individual who initially revealed her actions to me, played a significant role in my next steps. I reached out to him in the same manner he had contacted me, intending to uncover the dynamics of his relationship with my wife. He disclosed feeling pressured initially due to her position of authority, but eventually found solace in the intimacy they shared. I recall likening Pedro's situation to Stockholm Syndrome, noting that he might not have ceased the relationship if not for the initial pressure from his superior. Despite acknowledging the wrongfulness and policy violations, he remained hesitant to take action. I urged him to come clean to the company, emphasizing the harm caused not only to me but also to the organization and other potential victims. Though I feared he might perceive my motives as revenge due to my recent divorce, he agreed to report the misconduct. A day later, he shared a draft of the email, which I refined before he sent it out. Consequently, the company initiated a thorough internal investigation, aided by the names I provided of other individuals involved. As a result, my ex-wife was suspended pending the investigation's conclusion. Now, I have a genuine reason to despise Valentine's Day. This morning, as I was getting ready for work, I noticed my wife's phone lighting up with a message from an unknown number. Curiosity got the better of me, so I decided to take a look. The messages, all from the previous night, were explained explicit and damning. They detailed plans for a rendezvous while I was at work, including intimate desires and betrayal of our 12-year relationship. I couldn't believe what I was reading. Sensing that our marriage was likely headed for divorce, I left work early and returned home quietly. My worst suspicions were confirmed as I found them in our bed where they had been cheating. Without causing a scene, I left a symbolic gesture of my broken heart, a rose stained with a drop of my blood and a note expressing my anguish. Seeking solace, I drove to a nearby mountain cliff, where I now find myself, trying to drown out the pain with whiskey, cigars, and marijuana. Despite her desperate attempts to reach me, I remain here contemplating the city lights below, feeling utterly lost and broken. I feel like my whole world has come crashing down. I can't stand the sight of myself anymore and I feel completely lost. I'm driving home now, contemplating sleeping outside in the hammock. I've arrived home safely, ordered some food, and retreated to the backyard with my last blunt. I've called my cousin and his wife over for support. My cousin, who's more like a brother to me, is here, and we're taking a smoke break outside while my wife and his wife are having a heart-to-heart inside. I woke up to her tearful pleas for forgiveness, but I couldn't bring myself to respond. I feel numb, like my heart has been ripped out and stomped on. I haven't made any major decisions yet, but I plan to return to the mountain with my cousin and his wife to gain some perspective. We'll hang out there, unwind, and maybe share a few laughs. I finally confronted my wife and she admitted to cheating, claiming it was the thrill of attention from someone new. Despite her pleas to work things out, I've realized I can't continue to be a doormat. I may have initially overreacted, but thanks to all of you for helping me see that I don't need to resort to self-destructive behaviors. From now on, it's just Mary Jane and whiskey for me.